Okay, do you want to take it away or you want me to start?
So I can start with it. And so you kind of first topic you had for the leadership podcast was talking about bad leaders was kind of your idea. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it would be good to discuss like bad leadership experiences in the past, and then we can shift into discussing, why should you even choose leadership? Why should you become a good leader, and how can you do that? I'm gonna push this back further just in case. But do you want to give it a go on the start?
For bad leaders,
Yeah, because I got a couple.
I'll give you a first dibs on that one.
Okay, so let's rewind. I think I'm maybe somewhere between 18 to 20, and I'm working with my mosque, and we're in Drayton Valley. We're setting up this entire hockey rink and whatnot. We're doing a convention there. So me and my friend, we get tasked with setting up some stuff on the rafters. Okay, so we have like a 20-foot tall ladder. We have no safety equipment and whatnot, and he's a big dude, and I was very skinny back then, and I was and still am afraid of heights, and so I'm like, sorry Yusuf, like you got to go up there. He's like, bro, come on, I'm heavier than you, right? I'm like, there's no way I'm reaching out like that for the rafter. So thankfully he goes up there, and I hold the ladder for him. And you can naturally guess it's going to take us a while to do this work because you got to go really slowly to be safe. And I want to say, everybody else is bustling around us and work is getting done, and we're kind of the slowest. And one of the guys in charge essentially walks by and tells us to go faster. And it's like, you want to go faster, buddy? You can go up there yourself, and you can find somebody to hold the ladder for you. Right? So that was one example that has stuck out and just left kind of a scar on that person's character in my eyes. From then, that there wasn't this, like we talk often about, like as a leader you should get yourself into the activity to an extent and like see what the problems are and see how you can make people's lives easier. But these guys were definitely walking around, hands on the hips, a little bit of the whip cracking, and just telling people like, hey, you should go quicker, you should do this, you should do that, what's taking so long, and not a whole lot of like, hey, how can we help you? Like, hey, there's a big guy up top on this ladder that's 20 feet above a cement floor, because we were inside a hockey rink. And there's a little guy, a very skinny guy, holding the ladder. Like, maybe I'll grab the ladder as well so it doesn't shake as much, right? And then the guy up top can go quicker, potentially. So that was definitely an example that I can think of, just bad leadership. It's like just very callous, no thinking through what you're doing, and no... The other thing I should mention, all of that was volunteer work. So we had like 40 guys there who drove from Edmonton to Drayton Valley. We had all unloaded like a 53-foot trailer and then started setting everything up. So it's like, hey, listen, like you're not paying anyone. There's no safety equipment. This is all voluntary. Like, at least encourage us to have a good time, maybe make us laugh or just lead us, guide us, right? So that's a story I can think of right off the top of my head.
Yeah, I totally can understand with that, and it's very tricky because one of the things I think about is that nobody's really taught how to be a great leader. It's like there's not really any degrees on it, and there's not really kind of any coaching, and it's very tricky to figure that out because some people are naturally very relational, but maybe not necessarily very focused on the productivity, and then other people are very focused on the productivity and not necessarily very relational. And ideally, with good leadership, you want to kind of marry the couple of both being very relational and being able to connect with people, but also kind of being able to add some productivity and some focus and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. Like, so going back to the examples from the mosque, like there's this one individual, and we still kind of call him by the title of leader simply because he had that relationship, and he also had the get busy, get working, right? But he really emphasized the relationship. He took the time to hear what people had to say. So I road trip to Toronto twice with the mosque for an event. So for the record, that's about 12 days in a car, in a minivan with 5 other dudes.
It's a lot.
And the first time we did it, even the second time, he kind of took a panel, sat down, and listened to what people had to say. And it's like, hey, what would you like? Best outcome that, hey, we're going to take a car there. What would you like to do? Let's see if we can make it possible.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the Moss system that I'm part of is very much like the school system. It's very top-down, hierarchical.
Mm-hmm.
So when we got there, after 3 days of driving, and it's like, hey, there's an afternoon of this 3-day event where maybe we don't need to be there. Hey, can we slip away and go to downtown and maybe see the CN Tower, go to the zoo, go see this arena, whatever, like just be tourists.
Yep.
The answer was given no. And now that's quite disappointing when you're like, hey man, come on, you promised us. But to see our leader go there, put his neck out on the line and say like, hey, my guys have driven 3 days. We have another 3 days back. Like, come on, let us go. Give us some time. And to see him actually fight and advocate and recognize that he did everything he could, but just was told no, that we can forgive him for that, because it's like, hey, you didn't just show up there and then tell us excuses like, no, like I can't ask them, right? They said we're supposed to stay at the program. Come on, we should be at the program. Even he was of the mindset of like, yeah, I want to go too. Like, I want to see downtown. There's some stuff I'd like to visit. And so again, that relationship, but also that like, okay, we also got to get stuff done, right? So he'd make sure like, hey, do we have a guy competing in, let's say, some speech contest? Do we have a team for soccer? Who's out there that wants to play, who's here, who isn't playing right now? So
interesting. So what I'm kind of curious is, so you kind of had these experiences in the past, right, where you kind of got to see good leadership and bad leadership. I'm curious, how has it kind of changed after your experience in living in the host for the last year, and kind of me kind of preaching the leadership gospel more and being able to articulate into words? Because a lot of these experiences can be very experiential, but you maybe never really were able to process it through words, where I think I've kind of probably added more words and context around what leadership is and what it isn't. And I'm curious how that's kind of shifted your perspective. And
definitely having the Maxwell stuff, and then like, because I think we should do another episode on the 5 levels of leadership, right? But understanding for myself how to take it to the next level, like how can I make this situation into an experience. So the example from last year's school year I told you about, like I kind of ended up in the gym for the afternoon, and I was with a bunch of boys and I was pretty tired, and I was like, I don't really want to play basketball, but I'll supervise them so they have something to do. But then I'm looking there, sitting around, just seeing like, okay, nothing's happening, right? Like, let's get something to happen. So I got to put my shoes on, I got to get going, I got to get out there, right? And so understanding that it's not just relationship of like, yeah, these kids really like me and they look up to me, but also like, okay, how can I take what they're doing and step them up to the next level? So we ended up getting like a 3-on-3, 5-on-5 full court game going for like an hour and a half, and by the end of it, like everyone is swamped because you're so much running, right? But it went from rat ball to like actual basketball. We played a game, we got a score, we had some teams going, we switched up the teams, and so adding in some of that articulation of like, it's on the leader, it's on me to make something to happen, whether it's, assuming I'm in the leadership position, or, even the leaders in the Moss just recognizing like, okay, it's up to me. Like no one else's voice is going to matter as much as mine. So I need to do the advocating to see if we can actually slip away for an afternoon.
Yep.
Right. But, I would say, yeah, the programs do help, right? Because it's looking at leadership from the perspective of someone who's been doing it well for, let's say, 40, 50, 60 years, especially with Maxwell or whoever else we're talking about.
Yeah. And then so kind of the next topic or thread that you kind of had was to go through and kind of pitch on why leadership is important. I think we've already kind of started that. But what's kind of your thoughts or processes on like, what is the importance of leadership? What power and influence does it have in the world?
Well, it's just transformational, right? I mean, you could walk into a classroom and see just kids sitting there on their phone individually, or you could walk into a classroom and everyone's engaged, right? And part of that's also tricky, like you got to develop your content, material, and delivery system as well. But regardless, so even like I went on that grade 12 trip, and the leadership of like, okay, like let's make sure people are doing stuff, let's make sure something's happening. But I would say it comes down to transforming experiences and circumstances, right? And that's a very low level, right? Because eventually when you've been with someone long enough and coaching them, you transform them as a person, not just their experiences, right? So
So what do you think the difference is between transformational leaders and non-transformational leaders? Because I'd say most leadership is
It's a
non-transformational.
full circle leadership.
Hmm.
What is the difference between someone who can transform, just based off my own experience, especially with the students who are, some of the most difficult? It's obviously tough to say because I haven't had an outside perspective watching me and pointing out, but I would say like actually taking the investment and actually caring about the outcome potentially. Not articulating that the greatest, but with those students who are difficult, it's like recognizing, hey, one of these students wants to be saved and the other one doesn't. So with the one who doesn't, it's like, okay, how do I like rein this person in while they're in the building? And with the other students, like, okay, what advice can I give to this person so that they can start seeing some success and that they can start seeing, the light, let's call it, right, and a path forward. But I think that it does come down to the relationship, like actually caring, and then being invested in their success.
Well, one of the things I was listening to from the Leaders Greatest Return program is that he's talking about, to develop leaders, you need to give them leadership opportunities, that they need to have a chance to be a leader. And that his favorite modality is a leadership roundtable, where you kind of have a table of people and you facilitate a discussion, and it in a lot of sense gives everybody a potential to step up as a leader, to ask questions, to give thoughts, to kind of stir up other people's kind of ideas and stuff like that. And it made me think about how, let's say with like the meetup group, how do we facilitate